Before the beginning, there was no thing. There was no light, no darkness, no sound, no silence. There was only the potential. The Greeks had a word for this, chaos. The chaos. It is not emptiness, as we might imagine it. Emptiness is a lack of something. Chaos was a presence. Imagine a vast, bottomless, swirling chasm. A gaping maw, as the poet Hestia described it. It was a mist of everything, all at once. Matter and antimatter, energy and stillness, all churning together in a slow, cosmic storm. There was no up, no down. No time to pass. Just the infinite pregnant is. Feel that sensation, the dizzying, directionless, formless state of the absolute beginning. There is no air to breathe, no ground to stand on. Only a presence. And then from this churning potential, the first things separated. They did not appear from it, so much as they congealed out of it. They were not born, they simply became. The first was Gaia. The earth. Imagine the feeling of that first separation. A sudden sense of substance. A focusing of purpose. Gaia was not a goddess living on the earth. She was the earth. She was the broad-bosomed foundation. The solid ground upon which nothing yet stood. She was the potential for mountains not yet risen, for rivers not yet cut. She was stone and soil and core. A vast, sleeping consciousness of stability in the middle of the unending chaos. At the same moment that Gaia became substance, another being congealed. Tartarus. The pit. He was as far below Gaia as the sky would one day be above her. Tartarus was the inverse of Earth. He was the deep, crushing, misty gloom. The foundation beneath the foundation. A place of cold, damp finality. Not yet a prison, just a place. A deep, sorrowful, echoing space. And the third to emerge, some tellings say, was Eros. Desire. Love. This was not the small, winged child with a bow. This was the fundamental force of the universe. The creative impulse. The energy that compels things to join. Eros was the spark that would ignite all of creation. The yearning of atoms to bind together. Without Eros, Gaia and Tartarus would have remained alone, static. Eros was the engine. The why. The universe, in its first moment of consciousness, desired to create. And so Gaia, the great Earth Mother, felt this first impulse. She lay in the swirling dark, a lone island of matter. And she dreamed. She dreamed of a companion. She dreamed of a counterpart. And from her own being without partner, she brought forth her first children. She brought forth Pontus, the barren, surging depths of the sea, the salt in the tide. And she brought forth the Ouranos, the mountains, the great rocky peaks that were her own bones reaching upward. And then she dreamed her greatest creation yet. A being to cover her completely. A perfect mirror. She brought forth Ouranos, the sky. Imagine that moment. Gaia the earth creates Ouranos the sky. He emerges from her but is separate. He is a vast dome of potential light, of starlight. He is the heavens. He stretches out above her, covering her from end to end. And he looks down and she looks up. And Eros, the great force of creation, surges between them. The sky lay upon the earth. And from this first, all-encompassing and inescapable embrace, the next generation of reality was about to be born. The forces that would truly shape the world. The first dynasty, the tyranny of Ouranos, the union of Gaia and Ouranos, of earth and sky, was total. He covered her completely, and their children had no way to be born out into the light. They were born within the body of their mother, Gaia, trapped by the oppressive, suffocating presence of their father, Ouranos. And what children they were! These were not gods as we would later know them. They were not anthropomorphic beings full of jealousy, wisdom, or laughter. They were concepts. They were the raw architecture of the cosmos. First came the 12 Titans. Imagine them, not as people but as forces. There was Oceanus, the great world-encircling river. Not the sea itself, for that was Pontus, but the source of all fresh water, the river that flowed in a perfect circle around the edges of the flat earth disk of Gaia. His very being was the sound of endless, flowing water. With him came Tethys, the mother of the river gods and the ocean nymphs, the very concept of the deep, fertile underground springs. There was Hyperion, the High One. He was the light of the sun, the sheer, blinding brilliance of the day. And his partner Thea, the divine, she who gave gold and silver their shimmer. Together, they were the very idea of celestial light. There was Koios, the titan of the axis, the pole around which the heavens turned, the pillar of the north, and Phoebe, the bright, the titaness of the moon's light and of prophecy, the first voice at the oracle of Delphi. There was Krios, the constellation, the movement of the stars, and Themis, who was the embodiment of divine law, of what is right, the unwritten rules of the cosmos, and Mnemosyne, who was memory itself, the keeper of all that was and would be. And then there was Ipetus, the piercer, the father of the next generation of titans who would give craft and fire to mankind. And finally, the last two. Rhea, the flowing, the gentle. She was the embodiment of the earth's rhythm, of comfort and ease. She was like her mother, but softer, more yielding. And the youngest, the last-born, Kronos. We are given very little about his domain, only his nature. He was called the crooked counseling, the ambitious one, the schemer. While his brothers and sisters were their domains, the river, the light, the law Kronos wanted. He was the first divine being to be defined not by what he was, but by what he desired. He was cunning, and he was trapped. All 12 titans were trapped, born into the darkness of their mother's womb, pressed down by the crushing weight of their father, the sky, who would not relent. Gaia groaned under the pressure. But Ouranos was not finished. His union with Gaia produced other, stranger children. Next were born the Cyclopes, the Cyclopes. There were 3 of them, Brontes the Thunderer, Steropes the Lightner, and Arges the Bright Flash. These were not the brutish, sheep-herding monsters of later tales. These were master craftsmen, beings of immense power. They had a single, burning, powerful eye in the center of their foreheads. They were the spirits of the thunderstorm, the raw, creative, and destructive power of the forge and the lightning. They were brilliant and they were terrifying. And Ouranos hated them. He looked at them and felt the first stirring of divine fear. This was power he could not control. This was a challenge. And so as soon as they were born, he seized them. He cast them down, down, out of the body of Gaia and into the deepest, darkest, mistiest pit. He cast them into Tartarus. Gaia the earth shrieked. Her children cast into her own dark underpinning. And still the union continued. A final trio was born. The Hecatoncheires, the 100-handers. Their names were Katos, Briareos, and Gyges. If the Cyclopes were terrifying, the Hecatoncheires were an abomination of power. Each one had 50 heads, staring in all directions. And from their massive shoulders sprouted 100 powerful arms. They were beings of impossible, chaotic, overwhelming force. The sheer kinetic energy of an earthquake. The pure, unbridled might of the earth itself. And Ouranos was appalled. This was not order. This was not the beautiful, starry sky he represented. This was chaos. This was strength beyond measure, strength that he did not possess. His hatred was absolute. And so he did the same. He seized his 3 monstrous children and cast them down into the blackness of Tartarus to join their brothers, the Cyclopes. Now Gaia was in agony. Her 12 Titan children were still trapped inside her, a constant, painful pressure. And her 6 other children were imprisoned in the darkest pit below her. Her love for her children turned to a deep, slow-burning rage against her husband, Ouranos. The sky Ouranos was now the first tyrant. He ruled by force, by suppression. He looked upon his children not with love, in some tellings, but with revulsion and fear. He was the king, and he would not tolerate any challenge to his power. The earth Gaia could bear it no longer. The pressure within, the sorrow below, it was too much. The time for creation was over. The time for rebellion had begun. The conspiracy and the sickle Gaia, the great Earth Mother, began to plot. Her pain was a physical weight, a crushing burden. She knew Ouranos would never yield. He would keep her pinned forever, her children trapped in darkness. She had to act. So deep within her own substance, in the heart of her mountains, she brought forth a new element. She did not birth a child, but a thing. It was a gray, glistening, impossible metal. Adamant, harder than any stone, colder than any iron. It was the substance of pure, unyielding resolve. And from this adamant, Gaia fashioned a weapon. Imagine it. A sickle. A great curved blade, designed not to reap grain, but to reap a god. It was huge, heavy, and resonated with a cold, humming power. Its edge was so sharp it could sever the conceptual from the physical. It was a tool of absolute division. She brought this terrible, beautiful weapon to her 12 children, the Titans, still trapped within her. Her voice echoed in the darkness where they lay. She spoke of their father's cruelty, of her own unbearable pain, of their brothers, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, locked away in the gloom of Tartarus. She offered them the sickle. She offered them freedom. She asked for vengeance. My children, her voice resonated, a low rumble like distant thunder. You are born of a wicked father. He has imprisoned your brothers and keeps you in this suffocating night. If you will obey me, we will punish his evil outrage. He was the first to devise shameful acts. The Titans listened, and they were afraid. All of them. They felt the cold power of the adamantine blade. They knew the absolute might of their father, Ouranos, the sky who was their entire world. They cowered. They were silent. Oceanus, the great river, counseled caution. Hyperion, the light, was muted. None would speak. Except one. Kronos, the youngest, the schemer, the ambitious one. While the others felt only fear, Kronos felt opportunity. He felt the sting of his own imprisonment. He felt the resonance of Gaia's rage. He, alone, did not fear his father as much as he resented him. He spoke, his voice new but steady. Mother, I will undertake this. I will accomplish this work. For I do not care about our evil-named father. He was the first to devise shameful acts. Gaia's heart, the very core of the earth, filled with a vast, terrible joy. She had found her champion. She gave the adamantine sickle to Kronos. And then she told him the plan. She placed him in ambush, in a secret place, and she waited. Night came, and Ouranos, the vast, starry sky, drew himself over Gaia, the earth, eager for their union. He suspected nothing. He was the king of the cosmos. He was absolute. He spread himself across the land, his presence total. And as he did, Kronos, his youngest son, struck. From his hiding place, Kronos reached out. Not with his right hand, but with his left. He seized his father's generative power. And in his right hand, he swung the great, jagged sickle of adamant. In one swift, terrible motion, He severed his father from his own body. He cut the sky away from the earth. The act was instantaneous, and the consequences were cosmic. Ouranos recoiled, shrieking in agony. He rose up away from Gaia, separating from her for the first and final time. The sky was now fixed in his place, high above the earth. The space between them, the atmosphere, was created in that moment of violent separation. The Titans, for the first time, saw light. But the act was not clean. Blood divine ichor gushed from Ouranos. Drops of it fell upon Gaia, the earth. And from these drops she was fertilized one last time. From this blood of violence she birthed new, terrible children. The Ouranos, the Furies, the spirits of vengeance and righteous anger, who would hound mortals and gods who broke their oaths. The giants, massive warlike beings who would one day challenge the gods. And the Meliae, the nymphs of the ash trees, from which, in some tellings, the bronze race of mankind would one day fashion their spears. The severed parts of Ouranos, Kronos flung away. He threw them over his shoulder, back into the sea. They fell into the waters of Pontus, near the island of Cythera. And as the divine flesh drifted on the water, a white, churning foam and aphras began to spread. And from that foam a new being was born. A new kind of divinity. Not a raw titan, but a goddess of a new order. Aphrodite, the foam-born, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire. She was the final, beautiful, chaotic consequence of the first act of cosmic violence. Ouranos, the mutilated sky high above, cursed his son. He gave his rebellious children a new name, the Titans, the strainers, because they had strained to commit this terrible deed. And he prophesied, he laid a curse upon Kronos. "You have done this to me," his voice boomed, no longer intimate but distant thunder. "And so it shall be done to you. A child of your own will one day rise up and usurp you." Kronos, standing in the new light, the sickle still in his hand, heard the words. He was now the king, the master of the universe. He had defeated the sky, freed his siblings, and opened the world. The curse was a distant sound, a problem for another day. The reign of Kronos, establishing Mount Othries with Ouranos banished to the highest heavens, a silent, bleeding, and distant watcher, the cosmos had a new vacancy, a new throne. Kronos, the liberator, the ambitious, the crooked counseling, claimed it by right of action. He became the king of the Titans. His 11 brothers and sisters, freed from the dark womb of Gaia, emerged into the new, open world. They were vast, powerful, and now they had a realm to shape. They established their stronghold not on Mount Olympus, that peak was not yet truly sacred, but on Mount Othries. Imagine this place. It is the forgotten mountain, the dark twin of Olympus, a massive peak in central Greece, shrouded in storm clouds and the mists of the old world. The palace of the Titans was not the gleaming marble, symmetrical wonder that the Olympians would one day build. It was a fortress of raw Cyclopean stone, built by no one. It was a collection of peaks and chasms, of halls that were more like grand, resonant caves, open to the wind. The throne of Kronos was not gold. It was perhaps unpolished adamant or obsidian, cold to the touch. From here he ruled. The Titans divided the dominion of the world. Oceanus and Tethys ruled the great, encircling river. Hyperion and Theia commanded the sun and moon, setting them on their paths across the newly revealed sky. Koios and Phoebe took the poles and the whispers of prophecy. Themis, the great force of natural law, simply was, and all knew her power. And Kronos, as king, took his sister Rhea as his queen. She was his opposite. Where Kronos was scheming and driven, Rhea was gentle, flowing, and kind. She was the very essence of the earth's comfort, the rhythm of nature. Their union seemed for a time to balance the cosmos. The violent, ambitious king and the nurturing, stable queen. But there was a shadow, a founding betrayal. Gaia, the Earth Mother, had supported Kronos on one condition, that he free all of her children. The 12 Titans and the 6 she truly mourned. The Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, still languishing in the darkness of Tartarus. Kronos had made that promise. And now, as king, he looked down into the pit. He felt the raw, chaotic, unimaginable power of his 6 brothers. The 100-handers, the master smiths of the lightning. And he felt the same thing his father had felt. He felt fear. He was the new king. And like his father, he would not tolerate a challenge to his power. To unleash that kind of force into his world. It was unthinkable. Based on what we know of his crooked counseling, we can assume this was a cold calculation. He saw them not as brothers, but as the same chaotic threat his father had seen. So Kronos, the new tyrant, broke his first and most sacred oath. He left his brothers in their chains. He strengthened the walls of Tartarus. He set a new guard, a terrible monster named Camp, to watch over them. Gaia was enraged. Her son was no better than her husband. He had used her, taken her weapon, and perpetuated the very crime he was meant to avenge. The Earth Mother, betrayed again, fell silent. She would wait. Her memory was long. The curse of Ouranos was still echoing in the firmament, and now Gaia's silent rage was added to it. The new king was on his throne. The new dynasty had begun. But it was founded on a broken promise, a terrible act of violence, and a looming prophecy. Kronos was the supreme ruler. And he was, for the first time, truly, deeply afraid. His reign, which should have been a glorious new beginning, was now a race against a future he himself had set in motion. He was the king of the universe, and he was a prisoner of his own paranoia. The Golden Age, a world without toil, and yet, while this divine drama unfolded, while the new king wrestled with the ghosts of his past and the fears of his future, something magical was happening down on the surface of the earth. Gaia. The reign of Kronos, for all its founding darkness, was not remembered by mortals as a time of terror. It was remembered as the Chrysangenos, the Golden Age. The poet Hesiod, in his works and days, tells us of this time. It was the first and best generation of mortal men. Imagine this world. Try to feel it. There was no work. There was no need for it. Gaia, the earth, now free from the oppressive weight of Ouranos, gave forth all her gifts freely. You did not need to plow a field. The grain simply grew, thick and rich. You did not need to plant an orchard. The trees bent low, heavy with ripe, perfect fruit. Honey dripped from the trees. Springs of milk and nectar, some tellings say, bubbled up from the ground. The air itself was different. It was a perpetual, gentle spring. There was no harsh winter, no scorching summer. Just a soft, temperate, dreaming climate. And the mortals who lived in this age, they were different too. They lived like gods, though they were mortal. They had no sorrow. They had no toil. Their days were spent in ease and peace, in dance and song, and simple contemplation. They were beloved of the gods, and in some versions they lived among them. Kronos, the king, presided over them as a gentle, pastoral ruler. This is the great paradox of Kronos. The god who mutilated his father and would come to swallow his children was the king of a generation of perfect peace. This synthesis of his 2 primary myths, the tyrant from Theogony and the gentle king from Works and Days, creates a deeply complex figure. Perhaps his paranoia, his control, was focused only on the heavens, on his own family. For the mortals, he provided a perfect, unchanging, orderly world. And perhaps the greatest gift of the Golden Age was its relationship with time. Mortals did not age as we do. They did not grow frail or weak or diseased. They lived long, long lives, their bodies remaining in the peak of their strength and beauty. And when their time came to an end, it was not a tragedy. There was no sickness, no pain. Death was not a terrifying reaper. It was a gentle release. They would simply lie down and be overcome by a soft, warm sleep. Their spirits would leave their bodies as easily as a breath. And they did not go to a dark, gloomy underworld. After they passed, these spirits of the Golden Age became the daimons. They became guardian spirits wandering the earth, wrapped in mist. They watched over later generations of mankind, protecting them, guiding them, bringing them wealth. They were the good spirits of the land. This was the world under Kronos. A perfect, simple, harmonious dream. There was no war, no sailing on ships, for the ocean was a boundary not meant to be crossed. There was no law, for there was no crime. There was no property, for the earth belonged to all and provided for all. It was a time of pure, uncomplicated pastoral existence. It is a world that is almost impossible for us to truly imagine. A life without want, a life without fear, a life without ambition. But this, too, is its tragedy. It was an age of innocence, but also an age of stasis. Like children in a perfect garden, they did not grow. They did not chain. They did not strive. It was a beautiful, perfect, and ultimately fragile dream. And high above them, on Mount Othries, the dreamer was beginning to have nightmares. The king of the Golden Age could not escape the darkness that he himself had created. The gentle rhythm of Rhea's being, his queen, had changed. She was pregnant. The shadow of the prophecy, and the first child, the Golden Age, continued on earth. The mortals lived in their dream, unaware of the tension building in the halls of Mount Othries. But for Kronos, the dream was over. Every day, he heard the echo of his father's curse. A child of your own will one day rise up and usurp you. He had built his entire reign on that single act of usurpation. He, more than anyone, knew it was possible. He had seen the power of a son's ambition. He had been that son. And now he was the father. He watched Rhea. He watched his queen, the gentle, flowing one. And as her body changed, as new life grew within her, his paranoia became a living thing. It was a cold mist in the Titan palace. He was the king of all, yet he was utterly powerless against this one, simple biological fact. The prophecy did not say which child. It just said a child. He would love this child, he told himself. He was not his father. He was not Ouranos, who had hated his children from their first breath. He, Kronos, was the benign king, the ruler of the Golden Age. But the fear was stronger than the love. The fear was stronger than his own self-image. The curse was baked into the very foundation of his new world. Rhea's time came, and she gave birth to their first child. A daughter. She was beautiful, a new, purer kind of divinity. She was not a raw element like the Titans. She was a focused concept. She was the goddess of the home, of the hearth, of the sacred central fire. She was Hestia. Rhea held her daughter, and for a moment the halls of Othries were filled with a new, warm light. The light of a family. Kronos approached. He looked at the child, this tiny, perfect, divine being. He saw her power. He saw her potential. And in his mind, he saw the adamantine sickle. He saw his father's agony. He saw his own throne empty. This child, this beautiful girl, she was the first of who knew how many. Any one of them could be the one. Any one of them could be the weapon that Gaia and Ouranos would use against him. He couldn't risk it. He couldn't wait. His paranoia, born from his own act of violence, implied that any child, no matter how small, was a potential usurper. He couldn't allow the prophecy a single chance to take root. His crooked counseling mind found a loophole, a terrible, elegant solution. The prophecy said a child would usurp him. It did not say he could not stop the child. He would not be like his father. He would not cast his children into the dark pit of Tartarus, where Gaia could hear their cries, where they could be freed by some future rebel. No, he would keep them close. He would keep them safe. He would put them somewhere no one could ever find them, somewhere they could never challenge him. He went to Rhea. He asked to hold his daughter. And as Rhea, exhausted and proud, placed Hestia in his arms, Kronos opened his great divine mouth. And he swallowed his daughter whole. It was not an act of rage. It was an act of pure, cold, calculated fear. He did not kill her. She was a goddess, she could not die. He simply consumed her. He placed her back into the darkness. A darkness not of the earth, but of her father's own being. Rhea screamed. It was a sound that shook the foundations of Ouranos. The sound of a mother's first, impossible grief. But Kronos was calm. He had found the solution. The child was not dead. She was not imprisoned in Tartarus. She was with him. She was safe. He was safe. The king of the Golden Age had just consumed his first child. And the shadow of the prophecy, which he had tried to erase, had just become his entire world. The devouring, the children in the dark, the horror on Mount Ouranos did not end. It became a rhythm. A terrible, repeating nightmare set against the backdrop of the perfect, peaceful Golden Age mortals were still enjoying below. Rhea, the gentle flowing one, was heartbroken. But she was a goddess and the wife of the king. The union of earth and sky, even this new, broken version, was a fundamental part of the cosmos. She soon conceived again. Through the entire pregnancy, she was sick with dread. She pleaded with Kronos. She begged him. This child too. Would he take this one too? Kronos was unmovable. His logic was absolute. The prophecy was absolute. He would not risk his throne. Rhea gave birth to her second child. Another daughter. This was Demeter, the goddess of the sacred grain, of the harvest, of the fertile earth that fed the Golden Age. She was the very essence of her mother, Rhea, and her grandmother, Gaia. Kronos came. He saw the child. He saw the future harvest. He saw the power to give or withhold food. A power to rival his own. He took Demeter. And he swallowed her. Rhea's grief doubled. 2 of her children were gone, lost in the inescapable prison of their own father's body. And still it continued. A third time Rhea conceived. A third time she gave birth. Another daughter. Hera, the goddess of the air, of marriage, and of queenship. She was born with a regal light in her eyes. She was born to rule. Kronos saw this. He saw a future queen. A rival. A wife for the son who would one day depose him. He took Hera. And he swallowed her. Now a pattern was set. The halls of Ouranos were silent. The joy of birth was replaced by the silence of the void. Rhea became pregnant a 4th time. This time a son. His name was Hades. The unseen one, a quiet, solemn, and powerful god. His domain was the darkness beneath the earth, the mineral wealth, and the inevitable end that even the Golden Age mortals had to face. Kronos saw him. He saw a king of a realm he could not see. A power that operated in darkness. A thread. He took Hades. And he swallowed him. Rhea was breaking. Her children were being stolen, one by one. A fifth time, another son, Poseidon, the god of the sea, not the gentle, encircling river of his uncle Oceanus, but the raw, surging, violent power of the ocean. The earthquake, the storm. Kronos saw this power, a force to rival his own, a rage that could shake the foundations of the world. He took Poseidon, and he swallowed him. 5 children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all of them gone. Imagine the state of Rhea, the goddess of gentle flow, her very nature locked in a cycle of creation and devastating loss. And imagine the state of Kronos. He was now, quite literally, filled with his own children. He was bloated with his own paranoia. He ruled the Golden Age, but he was a walking prison. The king of the cosmos was a monster. And what of the children? They were not dead. They were gods. They were trapped, suspended in a timeless, lightless, internal void. They were not infants. In this divine prison they grew. They matured. Hestia the eldest, Demeter the giver, Hera the queen, Hades the unseen king, Poseidon the earth shaker. They grew to adulthood in the darkness, conscious, aware, and trapped. They could feel the presence of their siblings. They were a family of prisoners, waiting. All they knew was the close, oppressive darkness of their father and the echo of the world outside, which they had seen for only a moment. Kronos, in his terrible cunning, had not prevented the prophecy. He had merely contained it. This act perhaps shows the flaw in his crooked counseling. He had not destroyed his rivals, he had merely gathered them. He had placed all the seeds of his own destruction in one, single, inescapable place. Himself. Rhea knew she could not bear it again. She was pregnant a 6th time. She could feel the power of this child. It was different. It felt like the sky. It felt like lightning. She knew with absolute certainty that this was the child the prophecy spoke of. This was the one who was destined to overthrow his father. But how could he, if he was swallowed like the others? Rhea's gentle nature hardened. Her grief turned to the same cold, adamantine resolve that her mother Gaia had once felt. She would not let this child be taken. She would break the cycle. She had no power to fight Kronos. He was the king. But she had the cunning of a desperate mother. She needed help. She went not to the other titans, they were too afraid of their king, but to the oldest powers of all. She prayed. She prayed to her mother Gaia the earth. And she prayed to her father, Ouranos, the distant, mutilated sky. She pleaded with them to help her save her child, to help her finally enact the vengeance they had prophesied. And the ancient, primal gods they heard. Gaia and Ouranos, united for the first time since the Great Severing, devised a plan. They told Rhea what she must do. They told her where she must go. She was to flee Mount Othrys. She was to go to the island of Crete. The deception of Rhea, the stone of Crete. Rhea's time was near. She feigned sickness. She feigned a desire for solitude. Kronos, lost in his own dark thoughts, his body heavy with his imprisoned children, let her go. She fled. She fled Othrys, traveling fast and secret, a shadow of grief moving across the world. She went to the island of Crete, to the ancient sacred town of Lyctos. And as her birth pangs began, Gaia the earth received her. She was led to a cave, deep on the slopes of Mount Dicte or perhaps Mount Ida. The stories vary. Imagine this place. It is not a palace. It is a raw, living womb of the earth. The air is cool and damp. The only sound is the slow, steady drip, drip, drip of water forming stalactites. It is dark, but it is a welcoming dark. a hiding place. There in the secret heart of the earth, Rhea gave birth to her sixth child, her third son. His name was Zeus. As the baby drew his first breath, as he let out his first cry, a sound that echoed with nascent thunder, a potential threat, Gaia put the plan into action. Outside the cave, a group of warrior spirits, the Kurites, servants of Gaia, began to dance. They were young men in full armor. They clashed their spears against their shields. They shouted a war cry. They stomped the earth in a rhythmic, pounding, deafening dance. Clang, clang, stomp, clang. The sound was a cacophony, a wild martial music that echoed through the mountains, designed to do one thing: to drown the cries of the infant god, to hide the birth of the new king from the paranoid ears of the old one. The plan was not just to hide him. It was to deceive Kronos. Rhea, clutching her newborn son, looked at him for only a moment. She knew she could not keep him. He could not be raised on Othries. He had to grow in secret. He had to grow strong. She gave him into the care of the nymphs of the mountain, Adrastea and Ida. They would raise him. He would be fed not on a mother's milk, but on the milk of the sacred goat, the nymph Amalthea. He would be guarded by the Kurites. He would be raised by the earth itself. Rhea's part was not over. Her heart breaking again, but this time with hope, she left her son in the darkness of the cave. Gaia the earth presented her with a thing. It was a stone, a large oblong dark stone, about the size and weight of a newborn child. It was the Omphalos stone, the navel stone. Rhea took it. She wrapped it in the swaddling clothes she had prepared for her son. She held it to her chest as if it were the child. She wept over it, her tears real, so that the scent of her grief and her motherhood would cling to the linens. Then she returned to Mount Othries. She flew, her heart a storm of terror and hope. She returned to the dark, silent halls of the Titan King. Kronos was waiting. "You have returned," his voice rumbled. "Where is the child?" Rhea, her face a mask of practiced sorrow, presented the bundle. "He is here, my lord." "A son." Kronos, in his arrogance and his paranoia, did not even look. He saw only the shape. He felt only the threat. He was so blinded by the prophecy that he had lost all sense. He saw only the next thing: to be imprisoned. He took the bundle from her, the heavy stone wrapped in cloth. And just as he had done 5 times before, he opened his mouth and he swallowed it whole. He felt the weight of it join the others in his gut. A sixth child. He sighed, a great shuddering sound of relief. It was done. The prophecy was, again, averted. He was safe. He was the undisputed, eternal king of the cosmos. He turned from his weeping wife, satisfied. And Rhea, though tears streamed down her face, felt the first, cold spark of triumph. He had taken the bait. He had swallowed the stone. And far away, in a dark cave on the island of Crete, guarded by dancing warriors and nursed by a sacred goat, the future king of the gods, the lord of the sky, was drinking his fill. Zeus was alive. And he was growing. The rise of Zeus and the war of 10 years' time, for the gods, moves differently. On earth, the golden age passed away. The mortals who had lived in that dreamless ease finally slept, becoming the guardian daimons. A new, lesser silver age had begun. And in the cave on Crete, Zeus grew. He did not grow as a mortal child. He grew with divine speed and strength. He was raised in the wild, his companions the nymphs, his guardians the Kurites. He drank the milk of Amalthea, and some say he ate the honey of sacred bees. He grew strong, cunning, and powerful. His very presence crackled with the contained energy of the sky. He was his father's son, but his mother's champion. When he reached his full, divine maturity, Gaia, his grandmother, came to him. She told him of his past. She told him of his father, Kronos. She told him of his 5 siblings, swallowed, trapped, living in the darkness of their father's body. Zeus, who had known only the cave and the mountain, was filled with a righteous, electric rage. He was not the crooked counseling schemer his father was. He was a being of action, of power. He knew what he had to do. He left Crete. He traveled to Mount Athres. He did not arrive as a conqueror. Not yet. He arrived in disguise. Some tellings say he came as a servant, a cupbearer to his own father. He was aided by the Titaness Medes, cunning, the cleverest of all beings. Or perhaps by Gaia herself. A plan was formed, not of violence but of release. Medes or Gaia prepared a potion, a powerful emetic disguised in a cup of nectar. Zeus, in his role as cupbearer, presented it to the great king Kronos. "A special drink, my lord," he might have said, "to celebrate your unending reign." Kronos, arrogant and unsuspecting, drank it down. The effect was immediate and violent. His body was seized by a cosmic convulsion. He who had swallowed so much was now forced to reverse the act. He retched, and the first thing to emerge, the last thing he had swallowed, was the stone. The Omphalos stone. It shot from his mouth and landed at Delphi, where it would one day be revered as a sacred object, the navel of the world. And then the true disgorging began. One by one his children emerged. They were not infants. They were fully grown, powerful divine beings matured in the darkness. First came Poseidon, the lord of the sea, surging forth like a tidal wave. Then Hades, the unseen one, emerging like a shadow. Then Hera, the queen, regal and furious. Then Demeter, the earth mother, radiant and grieving for her lost time. And finally, the firstborn, the first swallowed. Hestia, the hearth, the calm, steady center, emerging with a quiet, burning light. They stood before their father. 5 gods, blinking in the light of the world for the first time since their birth, their bodies crackling with contained power. And beside them stood their rescuer, their youngest brother, Zeus. Kronos, weakened, terrified, looked at them. He saw not 5 but 6 rivals. The prophecy had come true. His children had risen up. The battle line was drawn. On one side, Kronos and the Titans. His brothers and sisters, Hyperion, Koios, Krios, Apetus, rallied to their king. They were the old order, the raw elemental forces. Their stronghold was the dark, brooding Mount Athres. On the other side, Zeus and his siblings, the Olympians, the new order, younger, faster, more cunning and burning with the rage of their imprisonment. Their stronghold became the new shining peak, Mount Olympus. And so began the Titanomachy, the War of the Titans. It was not a quick battle. It was a 10-year war, a decade of unimaginable, world-breaking violence. Imagine the conflict. It was not a war of mortals, with steel and arrows. It was a war of concepts. Hyperion, the sun, would scorch the earth. Poseidon would answer with tidal waves that climbed the mountains. The very foundations of the world, Gaia herself, groaned in agony. Volcanoes erupted. The seas boiled. The sky was a constant storm of divine energy. The noise alone was deafening. The clash of gods. The shattering of mountains. But for 10 long years, neither side could win. The Titans had raw, immense power and strength. The Olympians had speed, strategy, and a burning, righteous fury. It was a perfect, terrible stalemate. The cosmos was tearing itself apart. Zeus knew they needed an edge. They needed something more than what they had. They needed a power that Kronos had overlooked, a power that Kronos himself had feared. Gaia, the earth, who had waited so long for this moment, spoke to her grandson, Zeus. She told him of his other uncles, the ones forgotten, the ones imprisoned before the war with Ouranos had even begun. She told him of the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, still locked away in the deepest dark of Tartarus. "Free them," she whispered, "and they will win this war for you." The turning point. The forgotten prisoners. Zeus listened to his grandmother. He knew the stories. He knew that his father, Kronos, had broken his promise and left his brothers to rot in the pit. Leaving the battle, Zeus, along with Hades and Poseidon perhaps, journeyed to the very edge of the cosmos. He descended. Down, down, past the roots of the earth, past the foundations of the world, into the misty, soul-chilling gloom of Tartarus. There he found the terrible guard camp, a monstrous being with the body of a woman, the tail of a scorpion, and serpents for hair. Zeus in his full power struck her down. He broke the adamantine gates. And he walked into the darkness. There he found them. His uncles, the three Cyclopes, Bronze, Steropes, and Arges. Their single eyes burned in the gloom, filled with a primal, ancient power. And beside them the three Hecatoncheires, Cottos, Briareos, and Gyges. Their 150 heads turned to see him. Their 300 arms lay still, bound by chains. They were not the monsters Ouranos and Kronos had feared. They were beings of immense power, yes, but also of craft and loyalty. Zeus spoke to them. He offered them freedom. He offered them nectar and ambrosia, the food of the gods which they had never tasted. He offered them a place in the new world. All he asked was their allegiance. The gratitude of the prisoners was absolute. They had been in the dark for eons. First by their father, then by their brother. Now their nephew had come to free them. They pledged their loyalty to Zeus and to his cause with all their immense hearts. And they brought their skills with them. The Cyclopes were the master smiths of the universe. In the forges of the earth they set to work, repaying their debt. To Hades, who had come to the darkness, they gave a chineer, the helm of darkness, a cap that would render its wearer completely invisible, a weapon of terror and stealth. To Poseidon, the lord of the sea, they forged the trident, a three-pronged spear of such power it could shatter mountains, command the waves, and shake the very earth. And to Zeus, their liberator, they gave their greatest gift. They gave him the Kronos, the thunderbolt. They harnessed the raw, chaotic power of the storm, the flash of Arges, the thunder of Bronze, the lightning of Steropes, and forged it into a weapon that he could hold in his hand, a javelin of pure celestial fire. The Olympians were now armed, but the war was not yet won. They had the weapons. Now they needed the force. Zeus turned to the 100-handers, the Hecatoncheires. He unleashed them from their chains. He fed them. He restored their strength. And he pointed them at Mount Othrys. The final battle began. This time it was not a stalemate. Hades, wearing his helm, moved unseen among the Titans, spreading confusion, striking from the shadows. Poseidon, wielding his trident, did not just raise waves, he struck the earth. He shattered the foundations of Mount Othrys, breaking the Titans' defenses. And Zeus ascended to the heavens. He gathered the clouds. He held the thunderbolt. And he unleashed. The sound was a universe splitting. The light was brighter than 1,000 suns. He hurled bolt after bolt, shattering the peaks of Othrys, burning the forests, boiling the rivers. And while the Titans were blinded, reeling from this new, terrible weapon, the Hecatoncheires attacked. Imagine the sight. 3 beings, 50 heads each, 100 arms each. They did not fight with swords. They fought with mountains. They waded into the battle, and with their 300 hands, they picked up boulders the size of hills. They picked up the peaks of mountains, and they threw them. It was a bombardment of stone and earth, a non-stop, deafening, crushing avalanche of the world itself, hurled by 300 arms. The Titans were buried. They were crushed. They were overwhelmed. The raw power of the old order could not stand against the focused weaponry of the new, combined with the raw, chaotic, ancient power of the earth that Kronos had abandoned. Kronos himself was defeated. The king of the Golden Age, the father who swallowed his children, was brought down by the very children he had imprisoned, armed by the very brothers he had betrayed. The Titanomachy was over. The fall of Kronos and the new order, the reign of the Titans, had ended. The Olympians, victorious, stood amidst the wreckage of the cosmos. Zeus, now the undisputed king, had to dispense justice. He had to create a new order. He, like his father and grandfather before him, had to deal with his enemies. The Titans who had fought against him, Kronos, Apetus, Koios, Krios, and the others, were rounded up. They were bound in the same adamantine chains that had once held the Cyclopes. And Zeus, in his first act as king, cast them down. Down, down, down. Through the chaos they had created. Down past the roots of Gaia. Down into the misty, crushing, inescapable gloom. He cast them into Tartarus, the very prison his father had used. The cycle had, in a way, completed itself. The usurper was usurped. The jailer was jailed. But Zeus, in his wisdom, did not just leave them. He set a guard that could never be overcome. He set his uncles, the Hecatonchires, the 100-handers, to be the eternal jailers of the Titans. Their loyalty was absolute. The gates of Tartarus were sealed. Not all Titans suffered this fate. Oceanus, the great river, had remained neutral, and so he was allowed to keep his domain. The Titanesses, too, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, had not fought, and they were integrated into the new order. With the old world imprisoned, the new world could be divided. The three brothers, the sons of Kronos who had defeated him, gathered to divide the spoils. They decided to cast lots, to let fate decide their domains. To Hades, the eldest son, went the underworld, the vast, unseen realm of the dead, and all the mineral wealth hidden within the earth. To Poseidon, the second son, went the sea, the oceans, the storms, the earthquakes. And to Zeus, the youngest son, the liberator, went the sky, the heavens, the clouds, the thunder. He became the king of the gods, ruling from the shining peak of Mount Olympus. The new age had begun, the age of the Olympians. But what of Kronos? He was in the dark, the king of the Golden Age, now a prisoner in the deepest pit. He was immortal, so he could not die. He was simply contained. His story, it seemed, was over. A tragic, terrible loop. A god of time, now trapped outside of it, in a place where nothing ever happened. He was the tyrant who mutilated his father, the gentle king of a perfect age, the paranoid father who devoured his children, and now a defeated prisoner. Afterlife of a myth, the Isles of the Blessed, and yet, in some tellings, that is not where his story ends. The Greeks had many stories, and not all of them agreed. While the poet Hesiod gives us this clear, dark ending for Kronos, imprisoned forever in Tartarus, other traditions, other whispers were softer. The Orphic Mysteries, a different religious tradition, told another tale. They said that Zeus, after eons had passed, after his own rule was secure and his own wisdom had matured, eventually had a change of heart. He saw his father no longer a threat, but a pathetic, bound figure in the darkness. And he remembered, perhaps, the stories of the Golden Age. In this telling, Zeus freed Kronos. He forgave him. He brought him up from Tartarus. But Kronos could not return to the heavens. That time was over. So Zeus gave him a new domain, a new kingdom to rule. He made Kronos the king of Elysian, the Elysian fields, or in some versions, the Isles of the Blessed. This was the part of the underworld reserved for the greatest of heroes, for the most righteous of souls. It was a land of eternal spring, a paradise where there was no toil, no sorrow, a place where the dead lived in gentle ease. Does it not sound familiar? In this final, strange, and beautiful twist, Kronos, the king of the Golden Age, was allowed to return to his first, best self. He was once again the gentle, pastoral king, presiding over a perfect, peaceful realm, not for the living, but for the blessed dead. And so the myth leaves us with two images of Kronos, held in perfect, paradoxical balance. The monster, bound in the dark pit of Tartarus, paying for his terrible crimes. And the redeemed king, ruling peacefully over the fields of paradise, his tyranny forgiven, his story finding a final, gentle peace. It is up to us, which version we choose to remember as we drift and as we dream. Whisper. The story of Kronos is a cycle, a story of fear, and how it can turn a liberator into a tyrant, how it can make a father a monster. But it is also a story of hope, of the child hidden in the cave, of the brothers and sisters rescued from the dark, and of a new world built from the ruins of the old. The Titans are gone, their age of raw power put to sleep. The Olympians now rule. But the memory of that golden age, it lingers. A whisper of a world without sorrow. Thank you for listening to the Slumbering Mythos. If you enjoyed this story, if you feel more relaxed, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you know. And now it is time. Let the stories of the past fade. Let the darkness of Tartarus and the light of Olympus recede. There is nothing left to do but rest. Let your breathing be slow and deep. Let the night comfort you. Good night. Sleep well.